Warning, the following game shows scenes of disturbing content and extreme horror elements that mix real-life scenarios with mental illness and paranormal events to create a rather haunting experience. This game features graphic content, mental trauma, illness, and struggle, mentions of suicidal tendencies and self-harm, homicidal tendencies, drug and substance abuse, jump scares, and horror elements, flashing lights, disturbing visuals, and very strong language. If you suffer from suicidal thoughts, mental health, or abuse of drugs/alcohol, please visit your local medical professionals and family and friends to get you the help that you need to have a better quality of life. You are not alone. In the beginning, you will see a gruesome scene of Dwayne, the character you play as, murder his entire family, his neighbor, and then commit suicide. For obvious reasons, I will not be showing this. Visage is hard. Patience, thorough investigation, and good resources management are your best friend. Good luck. In the beginning, you play the role of Dwayne Anderson, going through his own perception of hell, or purgatory, itself. Everyone in this house dies in horrible and mysterious ways. Dwayne's punishment is to figure out how these people passed and hear their stories before bettering his own, learning his lesson. In Raykin's chapter, which is chapter 3 but I played it first, we learn about a man named Raykin, who is spiraling into madness thanks to a phobia of his. Raykin Al-Mutawa has scopophobia, which is the fear of being observed by cameras or the naked eye. Due to his fear, Raykin acts irrationally and with severe agitation. During this chapter, Dwayne witnesses Raykin being taken into a psychiatric ward and being treated by the doctors who work there. However, Raykin feels they are government agents trying to experiment on him. Dwayne is able to see just what Raykin sees. Horrible, faceless entities, always haunting him everywhere he goes, taunting him and terrorizing him to the very last breaking point he has. Raykin has beat down and murdered a few fellow inmates due to these hallucinations, thanks to his psychosis. Medication does not seem to aid him at all. Just as Raykin finally begins to calm down, doctors finally give an order to release Raykin for better behavior. However, during this time, Raykin had been planning an escape from the hospital. Due to failing this escape attempt, Raykin sadly is forced to live out the rest of his days in the darkness of solitary confinement, deemed forever mentally insane and unsafe to the public. In Dolores' chapter, in chronological order this is chapter 2, so I got that part right. Dwayne learns about an old woman who seems to be suffering from many mental illnesses. Dolores was a woman who had a loving husband who was a doctor. He tried his best to help her out by figuring out what issues Dolores was having. Dolores would walk around the house completely naked, become violent, have psychotic behavior that acts a lot like bipolar disorder, as well as even suspecting her husband was poisoning her instead of prescribing medication. They both had a baby they were looking after. However, due to the constant war with this mental illness of Dolores, major neglect was a big part in this baby's life. Eventually, Dolores' mental illness took her way too far. She went up to her husband's study room as he was reading in his chair about her illness and put him out of his misery using 7 knives to the chest. A day or so passed after she killed her husband in her psychosis-ridden delirium. During this time, she took care of the baby for just a short amount of time, but then she decided to end it all. One morning, after checking on her baby one last time, she hung herself. I'm not sure if it was the guilt, depression, or her mental illness taking over during this, but either way, she seemed to just have no more will to live, even for the baby. I'm not sure what happened to the baby, for it seems it was left behind. In Lucy's chapter, originally chapter 1, but I played it last because I felt it was the scariest, we learn of a little girl who is a bit abnormal when it comes to behavior. She had an imaginary friend who would tell her to do things, horrible things that only she could hear, things only she could see. Lucy had a bird named Pico, but this imaginary friend didn't like him at all. He kept picking at her, telling Lucy to kill the bird, again and again, over and over, and because he was Lucy's friend, she obeyed him. This imaginary friend of Lucy's convinced her to do more vile things. The parents tried therapy, medication, and even a psych ward, but nothing worked. The entity, which was the name of the demon, kept its grasp tightly over Lucy's mind. This possession of Lucy was far too powerful to fight against, and the parents were clueless as to how to stop this chaos from spreading. After the entity had all the fun they wanted with Lucy, they forced Lucy to perform one final terrible act. As Lucy prepared a bath as a distraction, the entity forced Lucy to rip her own jaw clean off from her face, causing her to bleed out and die. Now Dwayne knows all of these horrible stories of the house. Now he must find his own story and pay for his own actions from his past life. Now, as we cleared before in the very beginning, Dwayne killed his whole family, his neighbor, and then himself. After collecting each VHS tape and watching them, Dwayne can collect pieces of a mirror mask to reveal exactly what happened to lead to this horrific act. As the player, we discovered Dwayne was severely depressed and had hallucinated about monsters hunting him down. The monsters represent Dwayne's stress and urge for escapism. When alcohol proved to be ineffective, Dwayne added prescription medication for stress relief in his efforts to escape this life. He was also slowly and surely abandoning his family in his drunk and drugged up haze. Dwayne's demons slowly kept creeping in, and it's a possibility that the ghosts of the past had also urged Dwayne to kill his family, neighbor, and himself. Dwayne, after realizing all the pain he has caused, realizes he can turn his afterlife around if he fixes his ways. Even after death, it is never too late to fix one's mistakes. The mirror mask, now fully repaired, represents Dwayne's retribution and a new, more pure way of life. Inner peace at last, ready to reunite with the souls of his family and ask forgiveness to those he has wronged. Visage is a dark, twisted horror game that frankly is one I absolutely had a blast trying to play. It was challenging, appealing, dark, and a real treat to those who love psychological horror. The graphics were a solid 10 out of 10 stars. The atmosphere was flawless when it comes to being unnerving, confusing, and honestly terrifying. The story, although beyond messed up for all the chapters, was an 8 out of 10. Personally, I feel Lucy's chapter needed a bit more in-depth story to it, for it was really short. Still, of course, really scary though. I felt the entity's world was a bit confusing to understand why it was there in the first place, like it didn't fit with the story. The music was a 10 out of 10. It always kept me on edge for every step of the way. The characters were a 7 out of 10, specifically talking about the antagonists here. Rating them separately. Dolores was a 5 out of 10. Her story was good, but her ghost was kinda boring and didn't have much inspiration. Raken got a 3 out of 10, he just wasn't scary at all in my opinion. And finally, the entity was a 10 out of 10. That thing was beyond terrifying, especially when it forced the light switches to be detached and the lights wouldn't work. The game was perfectly challenging. It really gets you to be invested into the game and even challenging every bit of your puzzle solving skills. 10 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends.